The millionaire pretended to sleep and left his wall safe open to test the janitor's 7-year-old daughter, but he was completely shocked by what the little girl did next. Before we dive into the story, drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Enjoy the story. Marcus Thompson pressed his back against the marble wall of his penthouse apartment, his heart hammering against his ribs like a caged bird desperate for freedom. At 30 years old, he had built an empire worth $200 million, but right now, he felt more vulnerable than he had since childhood. Through the crack in his bedroom door, he could see the living room where his elaborate trap waited. The wall safe hung open like a mouth frozen mid-scream, revealing neat stacks of $100 bills, exactly $50,000 he'd deliberately left exposed. Every muscle in his body was coiled tight as he listened for the soft footsteps he knew would come. The elevator had dinged moments ago, and Maria Rodriguez would be starting her weekly cleaning routine, just like she had for the past 3 years. But it wasn't Maria he was waiting for. It was her 7-year-old daughter, Emma. The little girl with pigtails and a gap-toothed smile had been greeting him in the elevator every Tuesday for months now. "Good morning, Mr. Marcus," she'd chirp, her dark eyes sparkling with innocent joy that made something twist painfully in his chest. While other tenants barely acknowledged his existence beyond polite nods, this child treated him like he was the most important person in her world. Marcus had spent sleepless nights wondering if it was all an act. Was the sweet, trusting smile genuine, or was she already learning to manipulate like every other person who'd come into his life? His ex-fiancée had seemed innocent too, until he'd discovered her real feelings in that recorded phone call to her sister. "Marcus is just my meal ticket, honey. The man has no personality, but his bank account more than makes up for it." The sound of keys jingling made his breath catch. Maria was entering the apartment. He could hear her humming a Spanish lullaby as she moved through the kitchen, the same melody she always hummed while working. But where was Emma? The school had an early release today. He'd made sure to verify that. The child should be with her mother. Minutes stretched like hours. Then he heard it, the soft padding of small sneakers on hardwood floors. His throat went dry. Through the crack, he could see a tiny figure in a yellow dress moving through his living room, her small hands trailing along the leather sofa as she explored with the curious wonder that only children possessed. Emma paused in front of his bookshelf, tilting her head to read the titles. Even from this distance, he could see her lips moving as she sounded out the difficult words. His collection of first-edition novels seemed to fascinate her, and she reached up on her tiptoes, trying to touch one of the higher shelves. That's when she saw it, the open safe. Marcus held his breath so tightly his lungs burned. This was it. This was the moment that would reveal everything. Would she call for her mother? Would she pretend not to see it? Or would she do what he secretly feared, what every other person in his life would do, and help herself to his money? Emma approached the safe with the slow, careful steps of a child who knew she was somewhere she shouldn't be. Her small face was a picture of concentration, her dark eyebrows drawn together in the most serious expression he'd ever seen on her young features. She stopped just inches from the opening, close enough to reach out and grab a handful of bills. Marcus's hands were shaking now. His whole world was about to change based on what this 7-year-old girl did next. Would she prove that innocence was just another lie people told? Would she shatter the tiny spark of hope he didn't even realize he'd been carrying? Emma raised her small hand toward the money, and Marcus closed his eyes, preparing for his heart to break all over again. But when he opened them a second later, what he saw made his blood run cold, and his mind reel with shock. Emma wasn't reaching for the money at all. She was doing something completely unexpected, something that would change both their lives forever, something he could never have prepared for. Marcus watched in stunned silence as Emma's small hands moved not toward the money, but toward the heavy steel door of the safe itself. Her little fingers struggled with the weight as she tried to push it closed, her face scrunched up with effort and genuine concern that seemed to radiate from her entire being. "This shouldn't be open," she whispered to herself, glancing around nervously with wide, worried eyes. "Someone could steal Mr. Marcus's important things." "Udi," the words hit Marcus like a physical blow to his chest. Here was a 7-year-old child from a family that cleaned buildings for minimum wage, living paycheck to paycheck in one of the city's poorest neighborhoods, and she was more concerned about protecting his wealth than claiming even a single bill for herself. She pushed harder against the safe door, her yellow dress with its tiny flower pattern becoming wrinkled from the strain, her small sneakers squeaking against the marble floor as she braced herself for leverage. "Mija, where are you?" Maria's voice called from the kitchen, accompanied by the sound of running water and the gentle clinking of dishes. Emma froze like a deer caught in headlights, then quickly stepped back from the safe. But instead of running away or pretending she hadn't seen anything, she looked around the room with the determined expression of a child on a mission to solve a problem. Her dark eyes, so much like her mother's, scanned the area until she spotted Marcus's reading glasses on the coffee table. With careful, deliberate movements, she picked up the glasses and placed them on the small mahogany table next to the safe, arranging them just so. "Maybe he forgot to close it because he couldn't see properly," she murmured to herself, nodding with the serious conviction of someone who had just solved a complex puzzle. "Mama says people forget things when they can't see good." Marcus felt something fundamental crack open inside his chest, not breaking apart, but opening like a door he'd kept locked and bolted for years. This child wasn't just honest, she was actively trying to protect him from his own apparent carelessness, creating explanations that would preserve his dignity. Emma made one more determined attempt to close the safe, standing on her tiptoes and pushing with all the strength her small frame could muster. When it still wouldn't budge, she bit her lower lip in obvious frustration, a gesture that reminded Marcus achingly of his sister at that age. Then her face brightened with another idea, the kind of brilliant solution that only a child's mind could conceive. She pulled out a small piece of paper from her dress pocket, what looked like homework, with colorful stickers at the top, and began fanning the air in front of the safe with quick, purposeful movements, as if trying to make the money less visible to any potential thieves who might wander by. "There," she said with deep satisfaction, stepping back to admire her handiwork. "Now it's much harder to see." The pure innocence of the gesture, the child's logic that she could protect his fortune with a piece of schoolwork, nearly brought tears to Marcus's eyes for the first time in over a decade. 27 minutes later, after Maria had finished her cleaning routine, and she and Emma had left the building with their usual cheerful goodbyes echoing in the hallway, Marcus sat on his imported Italian leather couch, staring at the still open safe. His hands trembled uncontrollably as he replayed every single moment of what he'd witnessed, each detail burned into his memory with crystal clarity. Everything he thought he knew about human nature, every cynical lesson life had taught him about people's true motivations, had just been completely overturned by a 7-year-old girl with pigtails tied with yellow ribbons and a heart that seemed untouched by the world's cruelty. He walked slowly over to the safe and found Emma's homework paper still positioned exactly where she'd left it, carefully angled to hide his money from view. It was a math worksheet with her name, written in careful, slightly wobbly handwriting across the top. Emma Sofia Rodriguez, Grade 2, Room 14. Several problems were marked wrong in red ink, but she'd drawn tiny, smiley faces next to each mistake, as if mathematical errors were simply part of life's grand learning adventure. At the bottom of the page, her teacher had written in neat cursive, "Emma, your arithmetic needs more practice, but your kindness report about helping the new student was absolutely beautiful. You have such a generous spirit." Marcus had built his $200 million fortune by trusting absolutely no one, by assuming every person who entered his life had a hidden agenda, a secret angle they were working. His own father had drilled that lesson into him from childhood. In this world, son, everyone wants something from you. The successful man figures out what that something is before they can take it. But Emma had wanted nothing except to protect him from his own apparent mistake. His phone buzzed insistently with a text from his lawyer about the Henderson merger, another billion-dollar acquisition that should have sent adrenaline rushing through his veins. Instead, all he could think about was the way Emma had struggled against that heavy, safe door, her small face creased with genuine worry for a man who was essentially a stranger to her. He picked up the worksheet with reverent care and studied every detail. Along the margins, Emma had doodled tiny flowers and what appeared to be a family of stick figures, a woman, a small girl, and surprisingly, a tall figure labeled Mr. Marcus, with a smiley face and what looked like a crown. She had drawn him into her family portrait. The realization hit him like a lightning bolt, and for the first time in 15 years, Marcus Thompson began to cry. That evening, Marcus found himself unable to concentrate on any of his usual routines. He couldn't focus on the financial reports spread across his mahogany desk, couldn't lose himself in the mindless entertainment of his enormous television, couldn't even manage to eat the gourmet dinner his private chef had prepared. He kept thinking about Emma's small hands pushing determinedly against the safe door, her unwavering determination to protect him from invisible threats. The memory reminded him with painful clarity of someone else, someone he'd spent years trying desperately to forget, but never quite managing to erase from his heart. His younger sister, Sarah Elizabeth Thompson. 23 years ago, when Marcus was 7 and Sarah was just 5, their father's business partner had systematically embezzled nearly everything from their family construction company, leaving them bankrupt virtually overnight. Marcus remembered with vivid detail watching his parents' seemingly solid marriage crumble under the crushing weight of financial devastation, remembered his mother's heartbroken sobs echoing through their house at night, and his father's explosive rage that seemed to fill every room with tension and fear. But most clearly, more clearly than anything else from that terrible time, he remembered Sarah giving him her most treasured possession during their darkest hour. "Daddy says we can't buy any more toys," she'd whispered one night, creeping into his bedroom and pressing her beloved stuffed rabbit into his trembling hands. Mr. Hoppers was worn soft from years of love, his brown fur faded and one ear slightly torn from Sarah's devotion. "But you can have Mr. Hoppers forever and ever. He always makes me feel better when I'm scared, and I think you're more scared than me right now." That selfless act of pure love from his little sister had been the last genuinely innocent moment of his childhood. Within 3 months, their parents had filed for divorce, and Sarah had been taken across the country to live with their mother in Oregon. The bitter, expensive custody battle that followed had poisoned every remaining relationship in their fractured family, turning relatives against each other and destroying any hope of reconciliation. Marcus had spent the next 2 decades methodically building impenetrable walls around his heart, convinced that Sarah's innocent generosity had been a beautiful anomaly in a world fundamentally full of people who took advantage of others' weaknesses. His engagement to Victoria Hamilton had seemed to validate that cynical worldview, until her true mercenary motives were revealed in that devastating phone call he'd accidentally overheard. Now Emma had somehow managed to crack those carefully constructed walls with a simple act of protection and kindness. She was exactly Sarah's age when his world had collapsed, but instead of taking what wasn't rightfully hers, Emma had tried to guard what belonged to him. Marcus walked to his floor-to-ceiling bedroom windows and stared out at the glittering city lights spread below like fallen stars. Somewhere out there in the vast urban landscape, Sarah was living her own adult life. He hadn't spoken to her in 15 long years, not since their devastating argument about their father's funeral arrangements had ended with both of them saying things they could never take back. The next morning, Marcus did something completely unprecedented in his carefully ordered life. Instead of heading directly to his office for his usual 7 a.m. strategy meeting, he found himself driving through unfamiliar neighborhoods toward Roosevelt Elementary School. He told himself he simply wanted to make a substantial donation, to give something meaningful back to the educational institution that was apparently teaching children about the importance of kindness in an increasingly harsh world. But as he sat in his luxury sedan in the school's cracked asphalt parking lot, watching Emma skip through the weathered metal gates hand in hand with her mother, he realized his motivations were far more complicated and personal than simple philanthropic duty. Principal Janet Washington was a formidable African-American woman in her mid-50s who looked at Marcus with undisguised suspicion when he appeared in her cramped, overflowing office without any advance notice or appointment. "Mr. Thompson, I know exactly who you are," she said, leaning back in her ancient desk chair and fixing him with a stare that could have cut glass. "You own half the apartment buildings in this district, including several that house many families from our school community. So when a man worth $200 million shows up at my office asking specific questions about one of our students, particularly a vulnerable child from a low-income family, every alarm bell I have starts ringing." Marcus felt uncomfortable heat rise in his neck and face. "Ma'am, I assure you I'm not here to cause any problems. I simply wanted to make a substantial donation to your school and ask detailed questions about Emma Rodriguez specifically," Principal Washington interrupted with the kind of sharp intelligence that had clearly served her well in decades of protecting children from various threats. "Mr. Thompson, I need to be absolutely crystal clear about something before this conversation goes any further. If this inquiry is connected to the apartment building where her mother works as a janitor, if there's even the slightest suggestion that their housing situation or her mother's employment is somehow connected to your sudden interest in this particular child, then we're going to have a very serious problem." The implications of her words hit Marcus like a bucket of ice water. He suddenly realized, with growing horror, how his actions must appear from the outside. A wealthy, powerful man showing up at a poor child's school, asking probing questions about her background and family situation. His intentions might be completely pure, but the optics were potentially disastrous. "I completely understand your concern, and I respect your protective instincts," he said as carefully as possible. "But this isn't about real estate or housing or employment issues. Emma helped me with something important, and I wanted to find an appropriate way to thank her and perhaps support her education." Principal Washington's stern expression softened slightly, but her voice remained firm and protective. "Mr. Thompson, Emma Rodriguez is genuinely one of the most special children I've encountered in my 25 years in education. She comes from a family that may struggle financially, but they never struggle morally or ethically." That same afternoon, just as Marcus was beginning to formulate a plan for appropriately helping Emma's family, he received a phone call that instantly transformed his world from hopeful to terrifying. "Mr. Thompson, this is Detective Ray Morrison with the Metropolitan Police Department. We need to talk immediately about Maria Rodriguez and her 7-year-old daughter Emma." Marcus's blood instantly turned to ice, and his heart began hammering against his ribs with sickening force. "What's happened to them? Are they hurt?" Have they been in an accident? They're not physically injured, but there's been a very serious incident that we believe is directly connected to your recent activities. Someone broke into the luxury apartment building where Mrs. Rodriguez works. Your building, sir. The perpetrator didn't take anything valuable from any of the wealthy tenants' apartments, which suggests this wasn't a typical burglary. Marcus was already grabbing his car keys with shaking hands, his mind racing through terrible possibilities. Then what did they do? Mrs. Rodriguez's cleaning supplies were deliberately contaminated with a substance that could have made her very sick, and someone left a threatening note specifically targeting her family. Mr. Thompson, we have substantial reason to believe this incident is directly connected to your visit to Roosevelt Elementary School yesterday. Principal Washington contacted us out of genuine concern for the child's safety after she noticed some unusual activity around the school. The drive to the police station passed in a nightmarish blur of guilt, self-recrimination, and growing dread. Marcus realized that his simple private test of Emma's character had somehow spiraled completely out of control and put an innocent child and her hard-working mother directly in harm's way. As he sat in Detective Morrison's sterile office, staring at the threatening note preserved in its evidence bag, the harsh fluorescent lights making everything feel surreal and frightening, Marcus understood that the real test wasn't whether Emma would steal his money. The real test was whether he possessed the courage and wisdom to protect her from the dangerous consequences of his own thoughtless actions. Detective Morrison, a seasoned officer with graying temples and tired eyes that had seen too much human cruelty, leaned forward across his metal desk. Mr. Thompson, there are sophisticated criminal organizations in this city that make their entire living by identifying and exploiting situations exactly like this one. Word has somehow gotten out that you've shown personal interest in this particular family. Now that family has become a target for people who see opportunity in the connection between wealth and vulnerability. Marcus felt the crushing weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders like a lead blanket. Detective, what exactly do I need to do to keep them completely safe? That depends entirely, the detective replied gravely, on what your true relationship with this family really is and how far you're willing to go to protect them. Because right now, Mr. Thompson, you're either about to become their guardian angel or you're the primary reason they're about to lose everything they have. Outside the police station's barred windows, ominous storm clouds were gathering over the city like a dark omen, and Marcus realized with absolute certainty that the biggest, most important test of his entire life was just beginning. Marcus left the police station with Detective Morrison's words echoing in his head like a death sentence that kept repeating with each heartbeat. Within 2 hours of that devastating conversation, he had mobilized financial and security resources that most people couldn't even imagine existed, calling in favors from connections built over decades of ruthless business dealings. His head of security, Catherine Walsh, a former FBI counterterrorism agent with steel-gray eyes and nerves that never wavered, was already coordinating with a team of elite private investigators to identify and neutralize the source of the threats against Maria and Emma. Sir, we've traced the break-in and the threatening note to a sophisticated criminal organization that specializes in elaborate exploitation schemes, Catherine reported, her voice crisp and professionally detached over the encrypted phone line. They systematically target developing relationships between wealthy individuals and vulnerable families, then either blackmail the wealthy party with fabricated evidence or directly threaten the family to extract enormous sums of money. Your innocent visit to Roosevelt Elementary School yesterday apparently triggered their automated surveillance systems and marked you as a potential target. Marcus paced the length of his penthouse office like a caged predator, rage building in his chest like a furnace that threatened to consume everything in its path. The injustice of it made his hands shake with barely controlled fury. Catherine, how exactly do we stop these parasites from destroying innocent lives? The immediate priority has to be comprehensive protection. I've already arranged discreet military-grade security for both Maria and Emma. They won't even know they're being watched by some of the best-trained operatives in the world. But, Mr. Thompson, there's something else you need to know. Something that makes this situation far more personal and dangerous than we initially realized. Marcus felt ice water replace the blood in his veins. What are you talking about? These people have done extensive homework on your entire life history. They know intimate details about your estranged sister Sarah, about your broken engagement to Victoria Hamilton, about every significant relationship that's ended badly in your adult life. They understand your psychological profile better than most therapists would. Sir, they're not just planning to use Emma as leverage for money. They're planning to use her as an emotional weapon specifically designed to exploit your deepest fears and vulnerabilities. The words hit Marcus like a physical blow that knocked the wind from his lungs. Sarah. They knew about Sarah, about the guilt he carried, about the love he'd never been able to express, which meant they understood exactly how to manipulate him through his greatest weakness, his desperate, overwhelming need to protect the people he cared about from the kind of pain he'd experienced. That evening, as storm clouds gathered over the city skyline, Marcus made a decision that would have seemed absolutely impossible just days earlier. He picked up his phone and called Maria Rodriguez directly, his hands trembling slightly as he dialed her number. Mrs. Rodriguez, this is Marcus Thompson from the apartment building where you work. I need to speak with you urgently about Emma's safety. There are some things you need to know immediately. The silence on the other end of the line stretched for what felt like an eternity. When Maria finally spoke, her voice was tight, with barely controlled worry and growing confusion. Mr. Thompson, is something seriously wrong? Has Emma done something she shouldn't have done? Is she in some kind of trouble? No, Mrs. Rodriguez, Emma has done absolutely nothing wrong. In fact, she may have saved my life in a way you'll never fully understand. But I need to explain some very complicated things to you right now, and I need to ask for your trust in a situation that's going to sound completely insane. Maria Rodriguez sat rigidly across from Marcus in his penthouse living room, her work-weathered hands clasped tightly in her lap, her intelligent dark eyes reflecting a mixture of profound fear and fierce maternal determination. Emma was safely at school, surrounded by the additional security Marcus had arranged without her knowledge, though she had no idea that the friendly new crossing guard and the enthusiastic substitute teacher were actually highly trained former military bodyguards. You're telling me that because you wanted to test my 7-year-old daughter's honesty, my family is now in serious danger from criminals? Maria's voice was carefully controlled, but Marcus could hear the underlying steel that spoke of a mother's instinct to protect her child at any cost. Mr. Thompson, do you understand what you've done to our lives? I know exactly how this sounds, Marcus said, leaning forward in his chair with his hands clasped, meeting her gaze directly. I know that I've brought this nightmare down on your family, and I swear to you, on everything I hold sacred, that I'll spend the rest of my life making it right if you'll give me that chance. But Maria, what Emma did when she found that open safe with all that money, she didn't just pass some arbitrary test. She reminded me that genuine goodness and selflessness still exist in this increasingly cruel world. Maria studied his face with the intensity of someone trying to read the truth behind carefully chosen words. Mr. Thompson, I clean your apartment every single week. I see exactly how you live your life. All alone in this incredibly beautiful place, surrounded by everything money can possibly buy, except for the things that actually matter in life. When Emma talks about you at home, she doesn't see a rich and powerful man. She sees someone who looks deeply sad and lonely, someone who needs a friend. Indeed, the simple, honest words cut through Marcus's carefully constructed emotional defenses like a sharp blade through silk. She actually talks about me? Every single week after we visit your building. She asks me if you're feeling any better, if you've been eating enough healthy food, if you have friends to talk to when you're sad. That child has been genuinely worrying about your well-being for months, Mr. Thompson. She sees things that adults miss. Marcus felt something fundamental and permanent shift deep inside his chest. All this time, he'd thought he was the one observing and testing Emma's character. But she had actually been the one, watching over him with innocent concern, caring about his emotional and physical well-being without expecting anything in return, except perhaps a smile in the elevator. "There's something else you need to know," Marcus said quietly, his voice heavy with the weight of revelation. "The criminals threatening your family, they've been systematically researching every aspect of my personal life. They know about my sister Sarah, about the mistakes I've made, about people I've hurt through my own selfishness and pride. They're planning to use Emma as an emotional weapon to manipulate me, and I absolutely will not allow that to happen." Maria was silent for a long, contemplative moment, her maternal instincts clearly warring with her need to understand the full scope of the danger. "What exactly do you need from us, Mr. Thompson?" "I need you to trust me completely, even though I know I haven't earned that trust. I need to move you and Emma somewhere completely safe while my security team identifies and neutralizes this threat permanently. And I need you to know that whatever happens in the coming days, I'll make sure Emma gets every single opportunity she deserves in life." "Mr. Thompson," Maria said softly, her voice filled with quiet dignity, "Emma already has everything she truly needs in life. She has unconditional love, she has strong moral values, she has a bright future ahead of her. What she doesn't have right now is safety, and if you can give her that protection, then we'll trust you with our lives." The safe house was a modest two-bedroom cottage in a quiet suburban neighborhood, nothing remotely like Marcus's luxurious penthouse, but undeniably warm, comfortable, and filled with the kind of lived-in coziness that money couldn't buy. Emma adapted to the temporary relocation with the remarkable resilience that seemed to be a natural characteristic of childhood, treating the entire situation like an exciting adventure rather than a frightening disruption to her normal routine. She had no idea about the heavily armed guards positioned strategically around the property or the sophisticated electronic security system that was monitoring every possible approach to their temporary sanctuary. Marcus found himself visiting every single day, officially to check on their safety and coordinate with his security team, but really because he discovered that he simply couldn't stay away from the warmth and genuine affection that seemed to radiate from this small, temporary family unit. Emma had somehow become the brightest spot in his carefully ordered but emotionally empty world, and watching her draw colorful pictures at the kitchen table or enthusiastically help her mother prepare simple, wholesome meals filled a void in his heart that he hadn't even realized existed until now. "Mr. Marcus, why do you always look sad even when you're smiling at us?" Emma asked one quiet afternoon, her crayons scattered in rainbow chaos across the wooden table as she worked with intense concentration on another family portrait that somehow always included his tall figure standing next to her and her mother. The innocently perceptive question stopped Marcus completely cold, like a small hand reaching directly into his chest and squeezing his heart. "What do you mean by that, sweetheart?" "Mama says that some people carry really heavy things inside their hearts that make them feel tired all the time, even when they're trying to be happy. Is that why you live all by yourself in that enormous, beautiful place? Don't you get lonely?" Maria looked up from where she was carefully folding their laundry, her expression filled with gentle concern and understanding. Marcus realized with stunning clarity that Emma's innocent observations were revealing fundamental truths about himself that he'd been hiding from his own consciousness for decades. "Maybe I do carry some heavy things," he admitted, his voice softer than it had been in years. "But being around you and your mama makes those heavy things feel so much lighter. You two have given me something I didn't even know I was missing." Emma nodded, with the serious gravity that only children can bring to profound conversations, as if his emotional revelation made complete sense to her 7-year-old wisdom. "Mama says that when you really care about people, they help you carry all your heavy things, and you help carry theirs too. That's exactly what real families do for each other." That night, sitting alone in his vast, echoing penthouse, surrounded by expensive furniture and priceless art that suddenly felt meaningless and cold, Marcus finally made the phone call he'd been avoiding for 15 long, pride-filled years. "Sarah, it's Marcus, your brother." The silence on the other end was absolutely deafening, stretching for so long that he wondered if she'd hung up. When his sister finally spoke, her voice was cautious, uncertain, filled with old pain and newer confusion. "Marcus, oh my God, is everything okay? Something terrible must have happened. It's been 15 years. "I know exactly how long it's been, Sarah. I'm sorry. I'm so incredibly sorry for everything that happened between us, for the cruel things I said at Dad's funeral, for letting stupid pride and stubborn anger keep us apart for so long when we should have been there for each other." He could hear her breathing, could almost feel her weighing whether to hang up immediately or stay on the line and risk reopening old wounds. "Why now, Marcus? After all this time, why are you calling me now?" "Because a 7-year-old girl just taught me something profound about love and forgiveness and family that I should have learned from my little sister 23 years ago when you gave me Mr. Hoppers." The revelation came at exactly 3:17 in the morning when Catherine Walsh called with information that completely shattered everything Marcus thought he understood about the escalating situation surrounding Emma and her family. "Sir, we finally identified the actual leader of the criminal organization that's been threatening the Rodriguez family. You're absolutely not going to believe this, but we have definitive proof." Marcus sat up instantly in his bed, every nerve suddenly alert and crackling with adrenaline. "Who is it, Catherine?" "Victoria Hamilton, your ex-fiancée. She's been personally orchestrating this entire elaborate scheme from the very beginning." The words hit Marcus like a lightning bolt, striking directly into his brain, leaving him momentarily stunned and disoriented. Victoria, the woman who had shattered his heart into pieces and confirmed his worst, most cynical beliefs about human nature, was now using an innocent 7-year-old child as a weapon to exact some twisted, elaborate form of revenge. How is that even possible? How could she have known about Emma? After your engagement ended so publicly and dramatically, she spiraled into serious debt problems and developed what appears to be a severe gambling addiction. According to our investigation, she blamed you entirely for her personal and financial problems and has spent the past 2 years meticulously planning this incredibly sophisticated revenge scheme. The break-in at your building, the threatening note left for Maria, the entire exploitation operation, it was all carefully designed to force you into an impossible position where you'd have to choose between protecting your wealth and protecting Emma's safety. Marcus felt rage building in his chest like molten lava, threatening to erupt and destroy everything around him. The calculated cruelty of using an innocent child as a weapon made him physically sick. She's using a 7-year-old girl as a pawn in her sick revenge fantasy. There's more, and it gets much worse. She somehow discovered your emotional connection to Emma and has been monitoring your movements for weeks. She plans to kidnap Emma tomorrow morning during the Roosevelt Elementary School field trip to the Natural History Museum. She's completely convinced that you'll pay absolutely any amount to guarantee Emma's safe return. And then she intends to expose what she'll characterize as an inappropriate relationship between a billionaire and a poor child to destroy your reputation permanently, even after she gets the ransom money. Marcus was already getting dressed, his hands moving with mechanical precision, despite the rage coursing through his veins. "Catherine, where exactly is she right now? Sir, you absolutely need to let law enforcement handle this situation. If you confront her directly and something goes wrong, Catherine, listen to me very carefully. That psychotic woman is threatening to hurt a 7-year-old girl who has shown me more genuine kindness and pure love than I've experienced in decades. I don't care about the money. I don't care about my reputation or my business empire. But I will not allow her to use Emma as a weapon in her deranged game of revenge." The final pieces of the puzzle were falling into place with crystal clarity. Victoria hadn't just accidentally stumbled onto this situation. She had been systematically watching him, studying his behavior, researching his psychology, and waiting patiently for the perfect moment to strike at the one thing that could truly hurt him. She had correctly identified that his growing connection to Emma represented something pure and precious that he would sacrifice everything to protect. But what Victoria's twisted mind didn't understand was that her elaborate scheme had already backfired in the most fundamental way possible. Instead of making him vulnerable to manipulation and control, Emma had actually made him stronger and more determined than he'd ever been in his entire life. The abandoned warehouse where Victoria had demanded their final meeting felt like a scene torn directly from Marcus's darkest, most terrifying nightmares. The building reeked of rust and decay, with broken windows casting jagged shadows across the concrete floor. She stood in the center of the vast, empty space, like a predator surveying her domain, her once beautiful face now gaunt and desperate, marked by the ravages of addiction and obsession, her expensive designer clothes hanging on her dangerously thin frame like elegant rags from a different life. But it was the sight of Emma that nearly brought Marcus to his knees with overwhelming emotion. The little girl sat on a metal folding chair beside Victoria, her small wrists bound with rope, tears streaming down her face in silent rivers of fear, but her dark eyes still filled with the kind of trust that only an innocent child could maintain, even in the face of terror. "Hello, Marcus," Victoria said, her voice carrying a bitter satisfaction that made his skin crawl. "Did you miss me? I've certainly missed our stimulating conversations about your emotional inadequacies." Marcus forced himself to remain calm, every instinct screaming at him to rush forward and snatch Emma away from this dangerous madwoman. "Let her go immediately, Victoria. Your fight is with me, not with an innocent 7-year-old child who's done nothing except show kindness to everyone she meets." Victoria laughed, but the sound held no humor whatsoever, only the sharp edge of someone who had crossed the line into genuine madness, innocent. "Oh, Marcus, don't you see the absolutely beautiful irony here? You tested this little girl's character with your pathetic safe experiment, and now I'm testing yours in return. How much is her safety actually worth to you? How much of your precious fortune are you willing to sacrifice for someone else's child?" Emma looked up at Marcus with wide, terrified eyes, but even through her fear, he could see the unwavering trust there. She believed completely that he would save her, that he would find a way to make everything okay again. The weight of that pure, innocent trust was both crushing and empowering at the same time. "You want to know exactly what Emma's worth to me?" Marcus said, pulling out his phone with steady hands and showing Victoria the screen displaying his banking application. "I've just transferred every single penny I own into a trust account with her name on it. $200 million, Victoria." Everything I've worked for, everything I've built, every investment, every asset, it's all hers now. Victoria's face went completely white, her expression shifting from triumphant satisfaction to shocked disbelief. You're lying. You're trying to bluff me. Check it yourself if you don't believe me. The electronic transfer went through exactly 5 minutes ago. Emma Rodriguez is now officially the wealthiest 7-year-old in America, and I'm nothing more than a man who owns absolutely nothing but the clothes on his back and the love in his heart. Emma's eyes widened in complete confusion, but Marcus kept his unwavering gaze fixed on Victoria's increasingly desperate expression. You were completely wrong about what this child means to me, Victoria. You thought she was my weakness, something you could use to control me, but she's actually my greatest strength. She taught me that the only wealth that truly matters is the love we give and receive freely. In the distance, Marcus could hear sirens approaching rapidly. Catherine had followed his emergency instructions perfectly, but the look of pure rage and desperate madness in Victoria's eyes told him that this confrontation was still far from over. "If I can't have your money and destroy your life," Victoria hissed, reaching into her designer purse with shaking hands, "then at least I can make absolutely sure you lose the one thing you really care about." Marcus stepped forward without hesitation, placing himself directly between Victoria and Emma, and realized that for the first time in his adult life, he was exactly where he belonged, protecting someone who mattered more than his own existence. Victoria's hand emerged from her purse, clutching a small silver revolver, her fingers trembling with the desperate fury of someone who had nothing left to lose. "You destroyed my life, Marcus. You made me believe you loved me, then you threw me away like garbage when you discovered I wasn't perfect enough for your impossible standards." "Victoria, please," Marcus said, his voice steady despite the terror coursing through his veins. "This isn't about us anymore. Don't hurt an innocent child because you're angry with me." "Innocent?" Victoria's laugh was the sound of breaking glass. "She's not innocent. She's your weakness. And if I can't have happiness, then you don't deserve it either." Emma whimpered softly, but her small voice cut through the tension like a blade of pure light. "Mr. Marcus, I'm not scared. I know you'll keep me safe." Those simple words of absolute faith gave Marcus strength he didn't know he possessed. As Victoria raised the weapon with shaking hands, Marcus lunged forward just as the warehouse doors exploded inward. Catherine Walsh and a team of federal agents swarmed the space with military precision, their shouts echoing off the concrete walls. "Drop the weapon, now!" Victoria spun toward the agents, and in that split second of distraction, Marcus reached Emma. He scooped her into his arms, his hands fumbling to untie the ropes around her small wrists as Catherine's team surrounded Victoria. The gun fell from her nerveless fingers as she collapsed to her knees, sobbing with the broken desperation of someone whose elaborate plan had crumbled into dust. "It's over, sweetheart," Marcus whispered into Emma's hair, feeling her small arms wrap around his neck. "You're safe now. I promise you're safe." 3 weeks later, Marcus sat in Maria's modest apartment, not the safe house, but their real home, watching Emma color at the kitchen table. The media frenzy about the kidnapping attempt and his dramatic financial sacrifice had finally begun to die down, though reporters still occasionally called seeking interviews about the billionaire who gave it all away. "Mr. Marcus," Emma said, looking up from her drawing, "Mama says you gave me all your money, but I don't understand why." "I didn't ask for money," Marcus smiled, her expression that now came naturally instead of feeling forced. "Sometimes the most important gifts are the ones people don't ask for, sweetheart." Maria entered from the kitchen carrying 3 cups of hot chocolate, her face glowing with a peace that hadn't been there during their weeks of hiding. "The lawyers called again today. They want to know when you're going to reclaim your assets from Emma's trust fund." "Never," Marcus said without hesitation. That money belongs to Emma now. It will pay for her education, for opportunities, for whatever dreams she decides to chase. I have everything I need right here." The apartment door opened, and Marcus felt his breath catch as a familiar figure stepped inside. Sarah stood in the doorway, her auburn hair now streaked with silver, her face showing the lines of a life well lived. Behind her stood a tall man with kind eyes and two teenagers who had Marcus's chin and Sarah's warm smile. "Hello, big brother," Sarah said softly. Marcus rose slowly, decades of regret and love warring in his chest. "Sarah, you came." "Emma called me," Sarah said, her voice thick with emotion. "She found your phone and somehow figured out how to call me. She told me her friend, Mr. Marcus was sad because he missed his sister and that families should be together. Emma beamed with pride. "I told her you needed your sister to help carry your heavy things." Sarah crossed the room and embraced Marcus with the fierce love of siblings reunited after too many lost years. "She also told me you became a hero to protect her. I'm proud of you, Marcus. Finally, I'm proud of the man you've become." Marcus looked around the small apartment, at Emma coloring pictures that always included him as part of her family, at Maria humming Spanish lullabies while she prepared dinner, at his sister's children shyly introducing themselves to their uncle, at Sarah's husband extending a hand of genuine friendship. This cramped apartment held more real wealth than his penthouse had ever contained. "Emma," Marcus said, kneeling beside her chair, "do you remember when you tried to close my safe to keep my money safe?" She nodded solemnly. "You forgot to lock it." "I wasn't testing your honesty that day, sweetheart. You were testing mine. And you taught me something I should have learned long ago, that the most valuable treasures can't be locked in safes or stored in banks. They live in here." He touched his chest, then hers. "In our hearts." Emma smiled and returned to her drawing. At the bottom of the page, in her careful 7-year-old handwriting, she had written, "My real family." The picture showed Marcus and Maria and Emma holding hands, with Sarah and her family standing beside them, all of them smiling under a bright yellow sun. Marcus realized that for the first time in 30 years, he was truly, completely rich. Outside, snow began to fall gently against the windows, and the little apartment filled with the sound of laughter and love, treasures that no amount of money could ever buy, and no one could ever steal.